Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about DCKO issue 4 written by Scott Snyder and Joshua Williamson, with art by Javi Fernandez and Zermanico, colors by Alejandro Sanchez, and letters by Hassan Osman El Hayo. The penultimate issue of DCKO is finally here, and it begins with a bang as Superman, Lex Luthor, Joker, and Wonder Woman get ready to fight the absolute Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, as well as the Darkseid possessed Booster Gold. The fight begins with the Absolute Heroes giving the supercharged heroes of Earth Prime a run for their money, with Clark caught off guard by Kal-El and his Sunstone cape, Diana not expecting Wonder Woman to be riding a Pegasus, and Lex finding that the hulking behemoth called the Absolute Batman isn't going down with a few blasts from his wrist cannons. The chaos Scott writes here is just great. It's fast-paced, kinetic, and just barrels right into what everyone has wanted this series to be. Lex calls for the Joker's help with the Absolute Batman, but the villain stops short since he wishes to change sides, bringing the battle to a screeching halt as he argues that Darkseid should have 4 horsemen, not just 3. The possessed Booster agrees, giving Joker a makeover and turning him into a living weapon. So I kind of expected Joker to do this, to be honest. Like, of course he would betray the heroes, of course he's going to stab them in the back. I did expect maybe he would be turned into the Absolute Joker though if he changed sides, like, you know, just to keep it a bit consistent with the other Absolute heroes. Maybe he turns into the big monster Absolute Joker we've seen over in Absolute Batman, but I kind of like that he had his own thing. It's kind of like an armored version of Joker. It looks pretty cool too. Superman thinks that they need to try and get through to the other heroes, as Diana knows that the heart corrupts thanks to what Big Barda told her, but Booster knows his horsemen don't have gentler natures like Superman thinks. This is what they were born for. The heroes finally have a moment where they realize what has become of Booster, and Superman gets his first confrontation with Darkseid since DC All-In issue 1, realizing that the villain is possessing Booster Gold, who orders his horsemen to kill the heroes. The fights with the Absolute Heroes is something I expected to happen really quickly and just kind of brush over a little bit. Not so much that they're not the focus of the issue, but so it's like, okay, we've had this, now we can kind of move on. But that's not really what happens here, as each of the Absolute Heroes gets a page dedicated to their fight with their Prime Earth counterparts. So Wonder Woman is up first and she fights with her Absolute counterpart and the Pegasus, and we get to see her take down the Pegasus with the lasso, and then the Absolute Wonder Woman reveals that she too has a lasso, and one called Sacrifice, which she uses to turn herself into a giant monster. Absolute Superman meanwhile comes for Clark, colliding with his Kryptonian counterpart with a force of 52 megatons. Clark does everything he can to absorb the energy from the hit since it doesn't affect anyone else, as Joker rips the kryptonite from Lex's warsuit, gifting it to the Absolute Batman, who replaces his removable bat ears with them and charges at Superman, spearing him in the back with the kryptonite. Man, I love that Scott is using the things we've come to see pretty regularly over in the Absolute books from these heroes as ways they are defending themselves against the Prime Earth counterparts, like the Sacrifice lasso has been set up in the Absolute Wonder Woman book, as have Batman's removable knife ears, and I like that he replaced them with the kryptonite and charged Superman like a bull. Like, of course he did. It's a neat connection to those books, and it feels really rewarding having seen them be birthed in those books and then get to see them in action in something else. As Clark is stabbed by the kryptonite, he remembers the game night he and the others were playing and how his game piece was taken off the board by Bruce. Clark thinks that Bruce is cheating at the game since he always rolls what he needs at that very time. As Joker demands he be allowed to finally kill a Superman, Bruce explains that he learned the imperfections of the game dice when he picked them up for the first time, and he knows just how to roll them to get what he wants. But he doesn't consider that cheating, it's just called being Batman. I kind of like the playfulness of that. Like, of course it's kind of cheating to have those skills and use them against your friends, but Bruce doesn't see it that way. Bruce just sees it as, he's just being Batman, he's just being who he is. I kind of like that, it's quite cool. Back in the tournament, all looks lost until Joker is taken out permanently by the arrival of Batman, who actually kills Joker in the same way he was killed at the start of the tournament, which I thought was quite cool. So Batman has survived his leap of faith at the end of the Night Fight issue 4 and was allowed back into the game because of it. Bruce helps up Clark, explaining how he survived with his mother box at the beginning of the match and got punished for it since he cheated. something Clark knows all too well. I love this reunion. It's just so good. It just feels light and fun. I like that Batman feels a little bit funner. The world's finest are back together and they're about to tear shit up. Absolute Superman comes for Clark, but Batman tells him to go get him, leaving himself to confront Absolute Batman, who thanks to Darkseid grows to become even bigger, but Batman isn't concerned at all. And I love that Batman is cracking jokes at this as well. You know, he just fought 4 Batman, so, you know, this giant hulking Batman in front of him is just nothing to him. He'll easily fight him. Absolute Batman comes for Bruce and he blows the hulking bat up with some plastic explosives, but it doesn't kill him. It just makes Absolute Batman very angry as he spears Batman with his prehensile cape, tossing the caped Crusader into a wall. Wonder Woman meanwhile continues to battle against the monsters that the Absolute Wonder Woman has become, killing them off and causing Absolute Wonder Woman to take human form again. She tries to talk with her counterpart, telling her that she needs to be more than this, but the Absolute Hero knows there is only Darkseid. Superman meanwhile gets probably my favorite part of the issue, as he knows the Absolute Superman is Darkseid down to his atoms, so he tries to cure him, using his heat vision at 1,000,000 bursts per second to blast the younger Absolute counterpart with enough radiation that it will denature his molecular structure and cause the parts that are Darkseid to die off, but it doesn't work. I love that Clark at least tried to do something. He tried to find a way to save the hero after figuring that talking isn't going to do it, so he's trying a scientific way, a way maybe his father Jor-El might have tried out, and I like that we can have a character who uses his abilities like that. That's really cool, a really good use of his abilities. While blasting him with radiation didn't work on Absolute Superman's cells, it did on his Sunstone cape, which he used to protect himself, and thus the cape hardens into a solid structure 1,000 times harder than diamond, sealing Kal-El in a crystal prison. With Absolute Superman dealt with for the moment at least, Clark attacks Booster, punching Booster Gold in the face with every single bit of power he has left. The punch breaks Darkseid's concentration, if but for a second, and ends up freeing the Absolute Heroes, who knew what they were doing, however they could not stop themselves as it felt like they were in a nightmare. Superman wants them to join in on their fight against Darkseid, but Lex knows it's not that easy since Superman didn't free anyone. Darkseid willingly let the Absolute Heroes go. So this is an interesting development, since does this mean the Absolute Heroes here are a version of them from some point in their timeline, or are they now 2 copies of the Absolute Heroes running around? This copy, the ones that Darkseid made, and then the ones we see off in the Absolute books. It's intriguing. It's left me with a couple more questions than I would like, and I'd like to have them answered at least by the end of this event, since what happens to them now? Lex, however, was right in what he said about Darkseid, and it's not over yet, and we get a really gnarly sequence where Darkseid finally has enough energy to be reborn, and he does so by literally ripping his way out of Booster Gold's mouth, climbing out of it and growing to the size of like Godzilla. He is a massive entity in this now. The final round of the Omega tournament gets underway, and the combined forces of the Earth Prime contestants and the Absolute Heroes launch their attack. I'm loving the callback to the game night and how this entire thing has been really one big roll of the dice. Something Clark knows is how they've always dealt with the end of days and how they always deal with the villains. It's always kind of a roll of the dice whether they'll succeed or not. They believe in themselves, but there is still that chance aspect where, yeah, they could lose, they could win also. Unfortunately for the heroes, they ended up rolling double Snake Eye, and Darkseid kills all but Superman and Lex in almost an instant. Superman survives his Omega Sanction blasts, screaming at Darkseid and asking if that's all he's got. Clark notices that Lex also survived and tells him they can do this together, but Lex knows that Darkseid is waiting for a winner. Lex does the inevitable and blasts Superman with one final energy blast from his suit, killing Superman and winning the entire Omega tournament. So this is kind of a big surprise, but also kind of not, because, you know, he's a villain. Of course, he was going to betray the heroes and win and, you know, take the win from underneath him. And of course, he gets a chance to kill Superman, because of course Lex Luthor would want to do that. I had hoped that there would maybe be a twist. And I mean, maybe there still is, because we still have issue 5 next month. But I was kind of hoping there would be something with Lex where it kind of continued the story that Joshua Williamson was doing with him over in the Superman ongoing, where he was a reformed villain. He got his memories back, but he still decided to try and at least do good, or at least, go along the right path. And then when he was taken in the Omega tournament and kind of imprisoned against his will, that kind of like set him off a little bit. But that goodness was still in him and could still affect him. But it doesn't look like that's the case. It looks like Lex is just completely evil now. Even more so now that he is King Omega. I do like the visage there of him with like a burning crown on his forehead. I thought that was quite cool. Now, the book does not end there, as Joshua Williamson writes a little backup epilogue and goes back just before the contest began and to the future, where Saturn Girl goes to talk with Darkseid. Despite Imra not really wanting to do that, she's feeling compelled to do it. Saturn Girl meets with Darkseid, and we get our first actual look at the future God King version of the character, the King Omega himself. And I love he's a giant head that radiates bright light. He kind of looks angelic in a way, and I think that's the point. He actually says like a line that the angels would say from the Bible, that be not afraid. And he's kind of giving off the sort of like angelic, nice vibes. He's colorful, he's bright, he's kind of doing that whole Lucifer thing, kind of like manipulating the Legion into what they think he actually is. I do love, however, though he is definitely evil, and he mentions that he has done evil things in the past. He doesn't deny that he has killed and stole to get what he needs, since they will help bring his order to life and actually create order for the universe and for the multiverse, which is what he wants. And everything he says is, again, it's kind of like Lucifer, that devil on his shoulder, where like you kind of get what he wants, and you could see how that could be taken as something good and something heroic, but it definitely is not. And I could see how he could use that to manipulate the Legion. He reveals to Saturn Girl that he created his own world, a mirror of Earth Zero, but he cannot seem to interfere with this world's timeline, and somehow cannot go back in time to it. So on his absolute world, his absolute creations resist and retain the free will of their Earth Zero counterparts. So this is a pretty big revelation. Darkseid created the absolute universe, but because he is stuck in the future with the Legion, he cannot manipulate it properly. Hence why the heroes are actually heroes and weren't immediately under his control. And from what we've seen in those issues, Darkseid's hand is very loose on the world, and now we have a reason for it, because he can't literally control this universe directly. He can just sort of shift things so that it goes in his direction, but he can't outrightly go and touch it. It also explains why the Absolute Legion have been going backwards through time, sewing Darkseid into everything, which we've seen over in the Superman ongoing and in the Justice League Unlimited book. Also, he can eventually get back into the present and gain access to the world, which he has done now, being reborn. The thought that has gone into this is quite impressive and feels so rewarding, being that I've read everything covering this event and its lead up. Saturn Girl offers to go back in time and kill the Absolute Heroes, but Darkseid orders her to go to their near future and capture them when they are at their weakest. Imra knows that they will have trouble getting into another world, but Darkseid knows that it's more than just another world or timeline. It's a weapon he will use very soon. The Legion get to work and capture the Absolute Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman from their nearby futures. So I guess this does confirm that the Absolute Heroes were just copies of the actual Absolute Heroes and under Saturn Girl's control. They're the future versions, more or less, of those heroes. Darkseid is pleased with Saturn Girl's progress, feeling the heroes are planning to try and take control of Apocalypse and crown one as King Omega. He wants them to continue, since as they struggle in their contest, their efforts will fuel the fire pits of Earth and give him a light to follow back to life. Instead, he wants Saturn Girl to find him a vessel to possess, which we know will eventually become Booster Gold, and we saw his possession take place over in the Superman ongoing. To reward Imra, Darkseid wants her to use her powers to peer into his mind, ordering her to do so when she hesitates. Imra's powers touch Darkseid and her eyes immediately begin to bleed from what she sees, and what she saw was that Darkseid is everything, right down to the cells in everyone's body. Saturn Girl sees that Darkseid would always win and that in the end there would be nothing. However, during her vision though, Saturn Girl catches the briefest glimpse of something else, a light that offered a different kind of creation, a light that came from Doomsday. So I was wondering when the time trapper Doomsday destiny to defeat Darkseid thing would come into play here, and I guess he's going to come in at the last minute here and save all of the heroes and the multiverse, and probably end up fighting Lex, since Lex is the King Omega, which there's a nice little bit of poetry there. You know, the beast that once killed Superman battles the man who wants to kill Superman. I've been loving everything they've been doing with Doomsday and actually building out his character and giving him some weight beyond he's the guy who killed Superman, so I love everything they've been doing with him, and I cannot wait for the final issue next month. DCKO issue 4 was a action-packed, chaotic, but in a good way, penultimate issue that brought our story into the endgame with some fantastic third act reveals, tying in some of the event's tie-in stories in some meaningful, exciting ways, and giving us that sweet, sweet absolute heroes versus Prime Earth heroes battle we've all been looking forward to since they were announced in issue 1. Everything Scott Snyder and his team are doing with Darkseid has been really great and extremely rewarding if you've been like me reading from the very get-go, from the very beginning of All In, and even before that as well. This is a story that's been several years in the making, and everything they're doing with him has been fantastic and building off everything we've seen across All In, across the Superman ongoing, and everything else we've seen in the All In initiative. It's been hugely rewarding. The reveal of the tournament winner and who is King Omega was really surprising. I didn't see that one coming, but I'm intrigued to see what Scott and his team do with that in the final issue next month. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10.